Welcome to the vintage shadows, where the past never rests, and forgotten horrors come back to life. Tonight, we open a door to a tale that has been buried in the silence and shadows of history for ages. A story that will chill your soul and linger long after the final word. So, dim the lights, brace yourself, and step into the haunting world of the vintage shadows.
It was a cold, moonless night, and Mark had been driving on the desolate country road for hours. The rhythmic hum of the engine was the only sound piercing the eerie silence that blanketed the land. His headlights cut through the dense fog like a knife, casting distorted shadows on the skeletal trees that lined the road. Fatigue gnawed at him. His eyes were heavy from a long day at work, and his hands gripped the wheel tighter to stay focused. The isolation was overwhelming, and an unsettling chill ran down his spine, though the heater in his car was on full blast. As he rounded a sharp bend, the road opened up slightly, and in the distance he spotted someone. A lone figure stood by the side of the road, drenched, as if she'd been walking for hours in the rain. But there hadn't been any rain that night. She wore a long, white dress that clung unnaturally to her frail frame, and her hair hung in wet, tangled strands over her face. Her body trembled in the cold, her thumb outstretched in a silent plea for help. Mark's heart skipped a beat. Who would be out here, in the middle of nowhere, so late at night? His instinct screamed at him to keep driving, but guilt gnawed at him. What if she needed help? She looked so vulnerable, her figure barely illuminated by his headlights. Against his better judgment, he slowed the car and pulled over a few feet ahead of her. The woman moved forward slowly, her footsteps eerily silent on the gravel road. As she approached the passenger window, Mark noticed something strange. The closer she came, the heavier the air inside the car seemed to grow, as if a cold, invisible weight was pressing down on him. She bent down, her face partially obscured by her wet hair, her eyes hidden in the darkness. Yet, something about her presence felt deeply unsettling. Her lips parted in a pale, ghostly smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. The way she spoke, it was like a gust of cold wind, soft yet chilling. "I need to get home." Mark hesitated for a second, feeling a strange, prickling sensation on the back of his neck, but he unlocked the door, and without a word, she slid into the passenger seat. The door shut with a soft click, and suddenly, the temperature in the car seemed to plummet. The warmth from the heater was no match for the icy chill that now filled the space. The woman sat unnaturally still, her body rigid, her face turned away, staring out into the fog-draped night. Mark swallowed hard, a knot forming in his throat. "Where are you headed?" he asked, forcing a casual tone into his voice, trying to dispel the growing unease that tightened his chest. "Just keep driving," she murmured, her voice low and distant, like an echo bouncing off faraway walls. Something about her voice unsettled him. It was devoid of warmth, as if she hadn't spoken to another living soul in years. He glanced at her, but she didn't move, her gaze locked on the road ahead. The silence stretched between them, oppressive and thick. Mark's heart began to race. He couldn't explain it, but the woman's presence felt wrong, unnatural. The rhythmic ticking of the dashboard clock abruptly stopped. He glanced at the time, Midnight. It had been working fine just moments ago. His skin prickled with fear, and his grip on the steering wheel tightened. She hadn't moved. Not an inch. Her pale fingers lay limp in her lap, her body still like a statue, her face turned toward the window. But in the reflection of the glass, something was missing. Her reflection. There was no sign of her, as if she wasn't there at all. Mark's breath caught in his throat. His stomach churned with rising dread. He could feel her presence looming larger, more oppressive, the air in the car thickening like a suffocating blanket. Are you okay?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the woman turned her head to face him. The motion was stiff, unnatural, as if her neck were creaking under the weight of something unspeakable. When her eyes finally met his blood turned to ice. They were black, empty voids, soulless pits that seemed to suck all the light from the air around them. Her lips, thin and cracked, twisted into a grotesque smile that stretched wider than before, revealing too many teeth, jagged and yellow. "Why did you stop?" she asked in a voice no longer soft, but hollow, cold as death. The sound of it sent a chill straight to his bones, like the echo of a scream in an empty cemetery. Mark's heart pounded wildly in his chest. His mouth went dry. I just wanted to help," he stammered, his voice cracking as panic gripped him. His fingers were trembling on the steering wheel. The woman leaned in closer, the sickening stench of decay wafting from her. It was the smell of something long dead, something that should never walk the earth. Her breath, foul and rotten, made his stomach churn as she whispered, her voice dripping with malice, "You shouldn't have stopped." Suddenly, the car lurched violently, as though it had been hit by some unseen force. The engine sputtered, the headlights flickered, casting the world in a strobe of light and shadow. Mark slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding on the wet asphalt. The car came to a screeching halt. In the blink of an eye, the woman was gone. The passenger seat was empty. Mark's chest heaved, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His mind raced to make sense of the impossible. She had been right there. He had seen her, felt her presence like a dark cloud pressing down on him. But now she was gone, or so he thought. Then he heard it, the soft, ominous creak of the back seat. Fear gripped him like a vice. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, but something stronger forced his eyes toward the rear-view mirror. His heart stopped. She was there, sitting in the back seat, her black eyes burning into his. Her twisted smile now impossibly wide, her head tilting unnaturally to the side. "It's your turn now," she whispered, her voice like nails on glass, cold and jagged. Before Mark could scream, her icy hands shot forward, wrapping around his throat like a vice. Her touch was death itself, draining every ounce of warmth from his body. He clawed at her hands, gasping for air, but her grip tightened, squeezing the life out of him. Her face was inches from his, her breath rancid with decay. "You should never have stopped for me," she hissed, her voice coming from the depths of the grave. The world around him blurred, darkness creeping in as his strength ebbed away. His last thought, a fleeting spark of regret, was that he wished he had driven past her, never stopping on that cursed road. By morning, Mark's car was found abandoned on the side of the road, the doors locked from the inside. The driver's seat was empty, and Mark was never seen again.